back to this show from Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Hi everybody and welcome to Teachers Talk Radio Tuesday Twilight Show with me, Timia. Every second Tuesday from 6 p.m. live, I discuss a relevant and hot topic in higher education with my brilliant guests. It's more a conversation than a talk, but we always want to make sure that you leave with something tangible, with some tips and frameworks and some practical case studies that can help you later on. But most of all, we would like to have you, those of you who listen us live, to discuss and share your thoughts and comments, and I will shortly invite my guest today. The topic for today couldn't be any hotter. This is employability. And if I remember back my university years, decades ago, it wasn't a thing, right? All the thing everybody focused on was getting the degree. This is what came from the lecturers and also from the parents, just get a degree. Nobody really helped us then, okay, and what's next? What will happen after the degree? It has changed by now, and employability is certainly a thing, certainly a word. We might argue if it's a buzzword or if a word, but certainly there's a shift. And how far we have gone, what still needs to be done. This is what we will discuss with my amazing guest today, who will obviously also share their vast experience and some very, very practical frameworks and tips with you. I invite them very shortly, but first of all, I would like to mention and thank our partner, Hashi Learning, who we are very proud to work together, and they are publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit this site, hashilearning.com, to explore the full range of their titles. And with this, it's my absolute pleasure to invite my first guest to the stage, Nadim Chowdhury. Hi, Nadim, and thank you so much for joining us today. Nadim is the Director of Careers and Employability at SCCA and previously at other institutions. And just trust me, he has amazing and vast experience. Very, very happy to have you on the show, Nadim.
Thank you very much.
And I'm very happy to invite our second guest, Stuart Norton. Hello, Stuart. And he was a guest in another podcast, and he's the head of educational excellence at Advance AG. Has been with Advance AG for more than 9 years and worked on some amazing frameworks there. So obviously has vast knowledge as well. So thank you to the both of you. And I thought we could kick off a little bit with the definition of employability, what we think about it, and we can discuss. It doesn't have to be a definitive definition, just what you think it is. Actually, Nadim gave me this idea because he had this question at one of the events where he talked. And just not putting you on the spot right away, I will also share mine. I believe that apart from the soft skills and hard skills that will help the graduates to get a job, it's also the confidence and having that network and confidence by the time they have the degree and they have to go for the interviews. And I strongly believe that higher education institutions are also supposed to have students with that, because many times they have the degree, they have really very relevant and recent knowledge. They don't know how to demonstrate it, and they don't have the confidence, and definitely don't have the network. So this is my take on it, but I'm very, very sure that I will hear some very interesting thoughts from you too. I don't know who would like to, Nadim?
Sure, I'm happy to go. I mean, there are loads of definitions of employability. I'm sure Stuart can mention, all the different sort of authors and out there who sort of come out with different models. But I think for me, it is really about giving students the skills so they can manage their future when it comes to their careers and gaining employment. It's not just about getting a job, but it's about having those skills innate within you to sort of understand what's going on in the markets and adjust yourself. So I think there's something called sort of the protean theory of careers, which I really adhere to. The idea that you can sort of shape shift your way in navigating the complex world of work, and being sort of one step ahead of the time. So you don't need sort of people to support you. You've got those skills that you've developed at university. So I've taken a bit more of a philosophical approach, and I think that would be my approach to employability.
It's also the skill to develop ourselves and not necessarily just kind of learn something and then, okay, but what's next? Because we know that there are a lot of changes that you yourself have to then keep track of and develop yourself as well, right?
Absolutely. So this idea that sort of you learn the skills to be able to navigate the world of work, and the way you do this is you keep up to date with what's going on. You practice those aspects of sort of self-reflection to see where you are in your own career journey.
Okay, thank you so much. This is a very interesting insight, and I know that you're also a coach, so I can see that that's also influencing your thoughts. Stuart.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and in fact, I've written about this subject, and I actually think defining it's a little bit reductive, and I say that because it is defined differently by so many different people, and I think you can take it from every position you like, and whether it's a neoliberalist argument, and is that even the role of higher education? And for me, I fell into employability when I was at a university as a young lecturer, and new lecturer, and I was given the role of employability lead. And I said, "What does that mean?" And it went, "You're the most junior member of staff, and you can't say no." And it made me start really thinking. This was a number of years ago, but it made me start really thinking, well, what is the purpose of university? What is it we're trying to do? Why are we here? And actually, I prefer talking about student success as opposed to employability, because I think if we mention the word employability, it sometimes belongs to someone else, and actually we're all responsible for it: the students, the staff, the employers, the parents. But actually, it's about being successful. So there are some really fabulous quotes, and there's some seminal texts, and Hillard and Pollard, despite the term being used from 1998, it still remains contested. One of my favorite ones is actually by Gazier from 1998, who defines it as it's something like ill-defined but a fuzzy notion. And actually, I really like that, because I think it is fuzzy, because I think it changes depending on what you're doing and what subject you're studying. It has been a buzzword, but I think this is why I've always said, and my senior fellowship was around employability. Prior to the role I currently do, I was my first job at the then Higher Education Academy was academic lead for employability. And to me, when I was talking to anyone, I always said it's about being successful. And I think there's a real difference now in how universities approach it, how we approach it in terms of tertiary education, actually how important it is all the way from schooling, because it's about making students successful. So there is a definition which belongs to Advanced HE, and I was part of authoring that. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I can tell you that it is a mix of the skills, values, behaviours and attributes, as well as that subject technical knowledge, and all of that wrapped together, that actually makes students, gives them the ability to have positive choices. And that may be in starting an enterprise, it may be in a career, it may be in a social venture, but it's that element of success and giving them a positive option and forward trajectory that I feel quite passionate about. Yes, I personally think it's reductive trying to define it, because we're never going to agree. We're academics. Why would we agree? So therefore, what do we actually have to do? And I think we just need to be a little bit more pragmatic in a day where there's so many disruptors, there's so many different things that are impacting university and the cost of it. Actually, let's just be a little bit pragmatic about what it is we need. I'm going to stop talking there, because you've probably I haven't spoken about employability for a while. So
No, this is why exactly I asked, not necessarily to have a definition, but to have your thoughts on it. And both of you just shared amazing. So it's actually challenging even the word employability. It's more about the success, it's more about a career, and not just being employable, but actually being successful more than just having a job, right? Because many times this is what people just focus on, like kind of getting the job right after the degree, right?
Can I just interject? Just listening to Stuart, and
Yeah.
it made me reflect on my career in higher education as well. I would say until it became a regulatory issue, right? Universities didn't really focus too much on employability. But since the NSS has started and also graduate outcomes, all of a sudden, you see heads of careers and directors of careers right at the top table with the vice chancellors. It's changed the profession of career services from being somewhere based, I don't know, in an annex near the library to being right at the heart of campus. And I think that has shifted sort of the profession within universities to take employability more seriously. I think just listening to your role as a sort of a junior academic, where you're going to have to do this, to now you're getting colleagues who are seriously passionate about working in careers.
That's very interesting, Nadim. So you're saying that it only became a thing because of the regulator and because of the graduate outcomes and NSS?
Well, I went to a Russell Group university in the turn of the millennium, and never once did I step into a career service and knew where it was. And now, most students will know about their career service, where they're situated on campus, as well as they're being, very much integrated within the curriculum. So I think things have changed a lot.
That's great. And this is we will go to some practical examples, of course, but before that, I'd like to ask you, both of you have a very good overview of at least in the UK higher education and universities, colleges. If it's possible to say, or at least to talk about it, how far we've gone. As Nadim said, yes, it was starting. Now we see the departments, they are not called careers, it's more employability, but what do you see? Because we can see that, okay, it's a word, and in some institutions, it's like having a career fair once a year and some guest speakers, and in others, you will share with me some examples what others do, but how far we've come based on what you can see.
I'm happy to start. I think from my perspective, sort of working as a sort of career leader in several universities, the idea of having professional standards as career professionals through the work of ADCAS, I think that's really helped. A set of benchmarks for careers, whether you're working in information and guidance roles to being leaders. I think that's given the role of a careers advisor credibility in the institutions. I think the fact that Advanced HE recognises us as well as being a part of the academic community has definitely helped. When I'm recruiting colleagues who work as careers advisors, one of the first things I look for is if they've got a fellowship as well. And I think that gives us the language to be able to work with academics. So that's definitely been a change from my time of working in careers. And the other aspect is that since the commercialization of higher education, students really, really want this. Parents sending, their children to university want to see a return on investment. I think that's definitely been the case since fees have been sort of gone up to £9,000 a year.
Yeah, thank you. Stuart, how you see how far we've gone, how much it's really properly embedded?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a really good question actually in terms of it being embedded, and I think that's an interesting term. And the frameworks and the approach from the sector bodies has been around embedding it, because in order to embed it, you need to be able to reach all students. And I don't disagree with Nadim at all, and it has moved so much. And I'll give you one fabulous example that I'm familiar with. But when we think about it, how many students does a university have, and then how many career staff do they have, and then what does that student staff ratio look like? And actually, therefore, in order to really meet all the students, it needs to be embedded in the curriculum, because it's the only place you can catch them. Now, to me, when we come back to our definitions of employability, absolutely, careers, third space professionals, CV writing, interviews, career journey, career mapping, the cartology of it all is absolutely important. As is complex problem solving. You go to the World Economic Forum and you say, what are the top 10 employability skills now, and those in demand? Complex problem solving is going to be there. Negotiation, creativity. Actually, these are in the programs. These are the things that we're actually getting students to do. That is employability. And there's a difference here around the employability language that we use and what employers use and what students use. We need to make sure we're talking about the same thing. But we have come absolutely miles. And actually, I think that's down to individuals. I think that's down to, I know a number of colleagues in career service that are third space professionals. They're not just in that career service, they're actually in the classroom. They're doing so many things. And that's grown and grown. You're absolutely right. Tuition fees, student expectations, employer needs, labour market, the dynamics, those have all added to this as well. And undoubtedly, within England, the metrics and the need to improve those metrics and how universities are able to market themselves is also critically important. How far we've come is, I'll give you an example from Wales. In 2018, then HEFQ, the Higher Education Funding Council for Wales, a arm's length government body, now MEDA, for the tertiary education. So it's not just higher education, it's tertiary education. They asked Advanced HE, we were commissioned to do a review of employability across all higher education providers. So we ran our survey that has been used for a number of different years and a number of different institutions. That report is available. We undertook that and we created a benchmark across the whole of the Welsh HE sector. You fast forward now to 2025. I'm just working on what our program is going to look like for 2026. I take a secretariat role in that. We have co-chairs that run that for every single HE provider. Every single university in Wales is part of that group. There are chairs. One of them is a assistant provost for employability from the University of Bangor. The other is head of careers at Aberystwyth University. And they are making huge inroads. And in fact, there's going to be some recent publications. They're due out in October. One is a report on what's been going on this last year, and the other one is on employability language and the language that employers use compared to universities. And the other one is on ethical and sustainable approaches to employability, and includes 49 case studies and every single institution has contributed to that. Yeah. That is massive. That is a whole nation approach to employability. And to me, when you get the funding bodies and the universities, that's how far we've come. Now, I'm not going to say that everything's perfect, and I think there is more still to be done. And I think we do need to look at we still need to win hearts and minds, and we still need to carry on that positioning. But it's grown massively, and it is something that's come much more to the fore. Enterprise is another area. Enterprise entrepreneurship, and I truly believe, higher education itself has to change. We're in a period where there needs to be transformation. And that doesn't mean needing to do more. The finances aren't there. So it means, how do we actually redesign and look at these things? And having that truly embedded is a way where students can actually understand their journey throughout. And I think that's critical. And I will just say, I'm conscious that this is a teacher's podcast all the way through. My partner, she is a primary school teacher. She's a qualified secondary teacher, but she's taught in primary for the last 4 or 5 years. She's a music teacher, and the value of creativity and music in schools and curriculum, and how that certainly in England has been absolutely hammered, and actually how we teach students. I just think that having a daughter at primary school age, there is something that we're perhaps not doing necessarily quite right, and I think we just need to look at that. And I think it needs to be a governmental intervention, truth be told. And it's really, really interesting. And again, maybe I should move to Wales. I will sing up the praises of those in Wales once again. They've actually rewritten their whole curriculum, and they're embedding enterprise and creativity all the way through, from schooling all the way through to college, tertiary, higher education. That's phenomenal. It frustrates me how our education system is sometimes set up, when there is so much fabulous work going on, as by yourselves.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything that you've just been saying, Stuart. And I think this idea of language, giving students the ability to understand where employability is taught. It's not just the role of career service. They're actually getting it through their curriculum. While you were talking, I was also reflecting on the inconsistencies around the different nations. It sounds like Wales is doing a great job, but where is a body for us to be able to share some of the great learnings coming out of Wales, and then who's going to be implementing it in the other nations. It seems sort of like a postcode lottery where you sort of, where you grow up, you get access to different types of employability. And I do think the government does have a role here as well in terms of shifting policies. So, you know, the Get Britain Working paper, which was a white paper released in, I think, 23 or 24, talked about sort of all the sort of inequalities in our societies and how to address them, but higher education wasn't mentioned once. So it's really interesting, you know, the inconsistencies. So I guess for me, I would really be keen to see how we can have sort of a consistent framework across some of our nations. You know, I know they're devolved when it comes to education policy, but I'm sure there's learning to be had.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't disagree. And if anyone is listening from UK government, I'm more than happy to have a conversation and see what can be done
there. Thank you. And actually, it's really great to hear that you can see that there's a huge shift. And it's not just you can see, but it's really proven. And I think it just will accelerate now. So that's really great to hear. And I'm not sure if the government is listening, but certainly there are some live listeners. So please share comments or questions or your own experience. We would like to hear, and we can discuss it or just say hi. And with this, I'd like to go to some practical examples to mention those. Embedding it into the curriculum, and then also Stuart and both of you mentioned, and also I know that Nadim is a big advocate of it being in the curriculum. So it's not just a department who will give some CV writing workshops, but it's really all embedded in the curriculum. When the students are on site, the curriculum and the actual sessions they are supposed to attend. So let's just give some examples if you can. And I know you can, both of you, on what are some case studies where it worked very well.
Okay, so I without sort of going into the specifics, some of the general things that I've seen at other universities also here at LCCA, experiential learning, you know, the ability for students to actually interact with employers within the curriculum, I think is really great. The idea of having live briefs and projects where they get to work on simulations. There's some fantastic providers out there who universities can partner with, either through an asynchronous approach or sort of in live classroom projects. I think that really gives students the real taste of how to work within groups, team working, and on a real project, which is going to be valuable for an employer. Because internships aren't available to everyone. You know, given the current state of the economy, many companies aren't taking on interns. So how can we actually get the employers on board? So experiential learning, live projects, live briefs, micro internships, all of those things embedded in the curriculum, I think works really well. The second thing is really working closely with faculty to ensure that everyone understands their role within it. I think that there is still a little bit of challenge within universities. Some colleagues are absolutely on board. And other colleagues, it's a bit of a challenge to get them on board. But that's where I think, you know, good leadership. If you've got deans who really understand the importance of employability and that's cascaded, they're accountable. And I think that makes a massive difference.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Stuart, do you have some case studies? Actually, you can also mention the framework if that's happened.
Yeah, so no, certainly. And I think, I mean, in terms of case studies, I don't know if we're able to share links with people, but we've run our employability symposium since I think it was 2018 or 19 now, and we publish case studies from, and we are very proud and excited to literally be split roughly 50-50 in terms of academic third space professionals attending that, and that's where a number of careers colleagues also publish as well. So there's probably around 20 coming out a year just from that piece of work. I mean, I can talk about some of those, but it's just as Nadim was talking, you know, he's absolutely right, and I can prove it. There's statistics, there's evidence that says if you get that placement, your chance of being employed in graduate level employment is considerably higher. It's about 12 percentage points higher than someone that didn't have that opportunity. So that's massive. So if you want to know how it's actually going to work, it's the placement. But the placement's expensive, the placement's time consuming, and the dean's absolutely right. In the curriculum, assessment, authentic assessment, employers in. You know, students have to make value judgments. Students are busy. I just pulled up because I wanted to check it, and it's 68% of full-time UK undergraduates are working paid jobs during term time. 68%. Now, we you know, that not everyone is fortunate enough to be able to go to university and live the full experience without having to undertake paid work or caring responsibilities, or perhaps they're a commuter student. How do they engage with that? And, you know, what does that look like? Perhaps they have children, or perhaps they're coming back to education. And I just think that actually there's a whole range of employability that's already going on there. So I think there's a couple of things. Authentic assessment is absolutely critical. I think that making... So I'm not going to sit here and profess to be perfect. And I always remember a really clear example from my own experience. My background's applied criminology, specifically policing. And I remember teaching, I can't even remember the name of the module now, but it was a group presentation. And I remember the students not happy with it. Why do we have to do a group presentation, Stuart? I don't like group presentations. So-and-so doesn't turn up. This doesn't happen, blah, blah, blah. And I remember sitting there and thinking, do you know what? It's a really good point. Why do I do this? I've done my PG Cert. I'm a fellow of the Higher Education Academy this time. But why is it? What, you know, I've kind of lost some of my own meaning in this. And I went back to it and, you know, what do you get from a group presentation? Well, actually, you get leadership skills and you get decision making and you get teamwork and you get collaboration. And actually, there's time management and there's presentation. And I went through it all. And we actually changed the assessment criteria to have, here's the subject matter knowledge, and co-creating with students is so important, co-creation. How much percentage are we going to put on this? And I think they came up with 51%. They wanted it slightly more on the academic. It was 51% and 49%. And then we broke it down. And then I said to them, what do you want to be when you graduate? I'm thinking of being a police officer. Okay, fantastic. So you go to, forgive me, Nadeem, you will know, is it prospects? And you go out and it brings up the, career things. You go, what skills do you need to be a police officer? You need teamwork, you need collaboration, you need decision making, you need decision under pressure. I'm like, well, look, 80% of these here are actually in my assessment. And so you can see how that's now transferable. And the other reason I would say is my undergrads are in psychology and criminology. And I did that because when I was growing up, I watched Cracker on TV, and I'm like, brilliant! I want to walk into a golf club, see a trophy, and go, aha, the body's on the 15th green. That's amazing. You know, I want to do that. So I went and studied this Gucci psychology and criminology, and then came out and went, well, what do I do? And it's like, well, actually, your psychology, you know, unless you've got a master's. So I think it's something like 70% of psychology graduates will not go and work directly in psychology or follow that through. So how do we ensure that they're successful, and what is it they want to do, and how relevant is psychology to such things as HR? And you start thinking about these things, but you need to have those open and honest conversations. And actually, for me, it comes down to the marketing as well. And, you know, if you think about other subjects, you know, if you go onto the websites and you look at a university and you say, what do your English language graduates do? And it's like, you know, there's on BBC and they're on this radio and they've had this book done. Brilliant. Yet 40% are going to go and work in HR. So actually, that's a real positive. So let's have that story. And why take away from that? So I think there's something around the narrative. I think there's something around recognizing what students do. How can we recognize what's already in their lives? And I can talk to you about case studies, and then there are some fabulous examples. But the one thing for me is scalability.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can go, oh, this is brilliant. And yeah, it is. But how do you do that to 500 students? So I think we just need to be careful and mindful. But the one thing I would say to you, and you're saying about nation approaches, you know, we need to be mindful. Higher education across the globe is growing fast and it's expanding. And I think it was a year and a half ago now, I was in Bahrain at Applied Science University, working with them on employability. And every single one of their students does have a placement. And they have employability using the framework. It was the new framework embedded into all of their programs, and that's massive, you know. And I just think that we run the risk of not recognizing that actually all of these things are interlinked. You cannot have employability without your authentic assessment. You cannot have that without flexibility and choice of assessment. You cannot have that without an inclusive and design-based curriculum. And I think we just need to think, you know, it comes back to, we need to transform higher education. And do we need a government to do that, or can we do that on our own? I mean, you know, it needs people with time, money, effort, passion. But it is, you know, I think it's an interesting time.
Yeah, it's another message to our listeners from the government, and and it's that was very good points. And one is that we should also tell students when we teach is actually also have their employability. It's leadership, it's group work, it's presentation. Sometimes they don't realize that it's also it helps them with a career, with the success, and with everything else that we've just mentioned, right? So I think it's also important.
A number of years ago, the HEA did something called student profiles. It's when there used to be subject centres. And if you go through that and you look at all the different things and the subject benchmarks, get your subject benchmarks and read through it. Employability is in there. It's just a different language and a different context. And we just need to come back to that. And I think that's just the genuine, honest conversation that we need to have. It's not necessarily rocket science, but it's about understanding those connections and being able to take that forward, really.
Yeah, and just to give you a really practical thing, while Stuart was talking, I was reflecting on the idea of authentic assessment. Something really simple is actually making the employability skills very explicit in the assessment document. So students, when they're undertaking the assessment, they've got the brief there, and you clearly articulate what are the employability skills that they're going to get from that every single level. So it sort of scaffolds. I think that really helps sort of solidify an understanding of how they're gaining those employability skills.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah, and the other thing, and I will say this, enterprise is so important. Entrepreneurship or enterprising skills are so important to everyone as well. Where do we allow students to fail, to deal with risk? Because actually, in order to be creative, you need to take a risk. But if you're paying thousands of pounds and you've got this high stakes one-off assessment, well, that's not great. So how about just have a pass or fail for one of your modules? So it doesn't matter what you get, but there's actually a patchwork assessment. And you're undertaking lots of different pieces and you're putting it forward. And we're encouraging that ability to fail. Because actually learning from failure is absolutely brilliant. And that's what people actually need to succeed. When you actually look at how people have done that and the resilience that comes from that. But when we set up university, we have this high stake one chance assessment. And I'll be honest, I played the game. University was first in family to go to university, didn't have the network, didn't understand what the game was, but I understood that I needed to get a certain mark, and that's what I needed in order to get on at that time. And so you have to make value judgments, and you make judgment calls. And if 68% of our students are working and they've got caring responsibilities and they're commuting students and everything's expected, where's the extra? It's not. It's in the classroom, and that's why you've got to do it. So create some of those sandpit opportunities. Have some pass-fail pieces of work. Let students do 5 pieces of work and put forward their best 3. I mean, as long as the learning outcomes are met, the standards are still there. We just need to be more creative with it as well.
I've got a question for both Stuart and maybe Tamira as well, and it's around aspirations. And the government are very, very keen for universities to ensure that students from disadvantaged backgrounds succeed. But what I've noticed is sometimes students don't have the language or even the aspirations, even when they get to university. And I'm not sure how we can address this as a sector. And it'd be wonderful to sort of hear, Stuart, if you've got any thoughts. Where does that start? Does that start from school? Or is there more universities can be doing?
Yeah, I think there's definitely more universities can be doing. I think it does start from school. I think, fundamentally, we probably can't step away from some of the real factors, which is that the attainment gap is an issue. And what is it that can be done to address that? And I think we need to look at that from an inclusive point of curriculum. And that's about disability, it's about race, it's about mental health and well-being. We're seeing students present with so many more disabilities and mental health challenges, but is that an increase, or is that just more of an acceptance, and therefore that people are now politely saying they're doing it? And if we look at some of the challenges around reasonable adjustments, it's actually about being proactive. It's actually about not being reactive and coming in and saying, actually, there is optionality and there is choice. And I think I've got colleagues in my team who inclusive education, inclusive institutions that are the cutting edge of EDI and working on some of these challenges. And I'm not going to profess to be an expert on that, but I what I do know is that we need to look at that head on. And I think it does come from schooling. I think we do look at the how students are supported. I mean, if I was being completely frank, a personal opinion is, no matter what opportunity students have, do you have those networks? And that's a massive thing as well. And there's that, that cultural capital, which is just so hard to give someone, and therefore we almost need to take more responsibility. If we're saying, come study at our university and it's shiny and it's amazing and you're going to have all these great opportunities, then we need to go, well, okay, that's brilliant. Now let's do it. Let's be honest and let's support those people. So I think that it's look, if there was an easy answer, we'd all be doing it. But you're absolutely right, Nadine. There's wider issues and wider societal issues that we cannot, and I don't think universities should be responsible for, either. It's like it comes from the schooling, it comes from the house service, it comes from how we police and over police, and it's all of those issues that are thorny and need to be considered. So it doesn't, we're not in this hermetically sealed environment, and we need to be aware of that. But we can still, say, okay, it's a thorny issue, but just because it's complex and just because it's a wicked problem, it doesn't mean we stop trying.
Yeah, thank you very much. And actually, we will come back to challenges. I'd like to talk about those as well, but a little ad break. And I'd like to highlight our partner, AQA, who know teachers are the real experts in the classroom. And that's why they work closely with teachers like you, combining your insights with their assessment expertise to create resources, tools, training, and guidance that genuinely make a difference. They are the UK's most chosen assessment organization. So chances are you already know their work. And as we head into a new school year, AQA are focused on helping teachers feel supported and ready. If you want to know more, then please search for AQA. You're listening to Teachers Talk Radio, Tuesday Twilight Show with me, Timia, every second Tuesday from 6 p.m. live and then on your favorite podcast platforms. And today we talk about employability, or obviously this is just a word, but we just also define it in various ways with my fantastic guest, Nadim Chaudhry and Stuart Norton. And we go on a little bit about the challenges. You already highlighted some of it, and also Nadim, the one you mentioned. What I can bring and why employability is so close to my heart. I'm coming from the business world to academia. And that was my job when I came in. I was in digital marketing, to actually look at the digital marketing program and see how it could be more practitioner and how it could help those students to actually, when they finish, then start work at an agency. And it's not enough just to have the definitions and some theory. You really have to understand, like, okay, how I set up an ad, a Google ad, and things like that. So what I did was partnering with companies and partnering with Google, partnering with some of the platform providers, who then created some sandboxes that we could have access to. They came on to do some guest lecturing as well. Students got some access to these platforms. It was amazing. Students loved it, except those, and this is exactly what you mentioned, both of you, who were less digitally literate, who came from a background where they were more beginners. And then it posed an issue that you have some students, they were totally excited, fantastic feedback, that they could have actually some knowledge that they could use, amazing. But what do you do with those who are behind? Yes, we had to do them extra sessions. Then there are some issues who cannot use the software, and this is part of the assessment. And yes, we can make them, it's very hard to have them choose, because if the assessment is about setting up a campaign, then that's the assessment. You cannot, when you're a digital marketer, you cannot have a degree in a digital marketer, a master degree, actually not being able to set it up. So this is one challenge, okay? Then, and I would like to hear you, because let's talk about really, and let's talk about the elephants in the room. Second one is, it took an enormous time to find those companies, have all those talks, then they having their talks within there. So, to kind of, when you come to a point when you actually have that agreement with a company, then they might disappear. It happens. Nadim mentioned the live briefs. Fantastic. Unless, except that you have to have those companies, they meanwhile disappear. They don't, so they are not trained to actually work within a higher education environment, right? Some of them are amazing, and some of them will disappear halfway through. So that's another challenge, really. It takes a lot of time for the lecturer, for the careers team, and that's another kind of challenge, right? And and I will come to the third one. I think it's enough. So let's just talk a bit about it. How do we approach it? And we partly talked about the first one. How do we make sure that it works for every student when we embed it into the curriculum and when it's amazing and when it really gives them a practitioner knowledge? And then secondly, where do you take the time? And it's also the lecturer's time, everybody's time. It might change from term to term. And also, you need lecturers who actually can. So, when another lecturer is coming in who is not familiar with that, then what do we do? You know, who is amazing in explaining marketing and explaining those ideas? Are probably not with the software. Students will expect the lecturer to then help them with that. I know I just threw a lot on you then, but let's just discuss the challenges of embedding it into the curriculum and making sure that everything happens that we just talked about so far.
Sure. Stuart, do you want to go first while I have a think?
Yeah, that's fine. I think, as I said, if there's an easy way of doing it, we'd all be doing it. So I think that's the first thing to recognize, is that it's a challenge. The answers to some of that has actually got to come from the program teams, and I say that because I wouldn't have the expertise to know around digital marketing. I would be much more inclined to be able to off the top of my head, support someone in criminology. But what I would say is, this is where I think the frameworks can help, because they have a methodology attached to them. That, if you strip it back to basics, the first thing we do is we do actually define employability. What does employability mean for you, for your students? And that's when you start to look at it. And so you'll have different words that mean different things. So ethics is perhaps a classic one, because if you're in business, ethics means something different than if you're in medicine, because in medicine, and being ethical and how you actually operate and your patient charters, etc., that's an exceptionally high standard. In business, you might make a decision to invest in something that may not be sustainable, or you may make a decision to invest in, I don't know, the tobacco industry, because actually that gives the biggest return to your client, and actually you're being ethical to your client, but there is also health implications for people at the end of it. So these words mean different things, but if you write down every single word and you look at it and you say, what does it mean in my thing? What do we need? What are all the different components? Once you've had that and you've agreed that as a program team, you then map that to your curriculum. Where's the examples? Where's it missing? Where, do we do much of this? Are we assessing it? Are we not assessing it? Once you've got that curriculum map, you can sense check it with your employers, sense check it with your students. That co-creation and explaining to them so they understand what goes into it is absolutely fantastic. If you like, and I always have some around, use Lego. The latest case studies we published just a few months ago, we were actually using Lego Serious Play to build what employability looked like for students in those courses. So myself and a colleague who is also actually an assistant provost of employability at Swansea University, we were with colleagues in Birmingham, in London, in Ireland, building attributes of everything that was required for students to be employable in their course, and creating that narrative and that story. That is so powerful. And once you've got that, actually you've got your course team looking at it, you've got your students understanding it, you're engaging your employers. Now you can start to see where those gaps are. Yes, there are certainly going to be fundamental things. We taught police officers, you have to understand the law. You will have an exam and we will not pass you if you do not score over 80% of this, because that is an absolute bare minimum and national criteria standard. Yes, of course, there are things that have to be done and you need people to do. You don't want a nurse not to be able to understand maths because you don't want them giving you 100 millilitres of something that's only going to be 10 millilitres. That's how problems come. So there are certain things and criteria and benchmark. But working with your careers team, working with your PSRBs, working with your quality departments, working with your schools and your colleges, so you have that understanding of what people are coming in with, then you can really start to make inroads. And I think the frameworks do just that. They're not prescriptive. We're not saying, here's a model, you must do it this way. We are saying, out of years and years and decades of literature and research, these are typically the most important things, and there's research that backs that. And if you want to go into it, you can find all that evidence. There's literature reviews that sit behind it. There's thousands of words that I do it. The framework is trying to distill 50,000 word literature review into quite simply something that is readable and manageable, and anyone can pick it up, and it's a starting point. Because you will have people that are absolutely at the top of the game, and professors and provosts and far more intelligent than I am doing this, and you'll have people that are interested but not sure. You'll have people that are pracademics that are coming from practice and have a really good handle on what's required in practice, but perhaps don't understand the research side of it. And we need to bring everyone together to understand that we are actually working on student success. And you say practical tools. There is a freely available resource assessment and feedback superchargers developed by colleagues at the University of Kent from an assessment framework and the assessment literature review. But one of the key components of that is work-based learning.
Yeah.
And that's in there, and it's a gamification. It can help people to look at it. So I do think we can do it, but it is that co-creation, it is that understanding. And I in all of my years, and I've been very fortunate, I've worked in many different countries. I've met with hundreds, thousands of staff. Yes, I've come across some prickly characters, but actually at the core of it, when I sit there, when I actually start off, I always say, we're here to talk about student success. And if that's not your core reason for being in this job and your role, then perhaps you need to think about that really carefully. Okay. And that really just disarms people, because actually it's a really good starting point, because yes, we do want our students to be successful. And you know what? There's always politics. There's always trouble. Look at the fiscal situation. When look at international students, there's so much going on, and there is so much that is under pressure. And, as I say, my partner is a primary school teacher. Trust me, I see the pressure that the teachers are under. My brother's a teacher as well at specialist school. So, I can see it all. But it doesn't stop that passion. It doesn't stop that understanding. And I think, I have worked with people that have come out and I've gone, oh, they were brilliant. They really enjoyed it. And people say, they are the worst person ever. They've never bought into this. They thought it was going to be rubbish. I was like, it never showed, And I think there's something around that genuine authenticity of the people that are doing it with you as well. This isn't an edict. I'm not saying you must do that. This isn't about game playing. This isn't about get your Delhi scores up. Oh, let's phone this course first because we know they're going to be employed, and we won't phone those until the end. This is about actually making a real difference. I come back to your courses. Where are your lawyers going? How many students that study law go on to be a lawyer? So how are we supporting them? Or do we just write off that thousands and thousands of pounds debt that they've put into that course? These are individuals. There's stories. There's, they come to university for so many different opportunities. And I think we've got an absolute obligation and a duty to do the absolute best we can. And employability, success, all of that is part of it.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear the passion. By the way, Stuart, is it freely available, the framework?
The frameworks are all freely available. Yes, you do not have to be an advanced HE member. Some of our resources are membership-based. That may be changing as we look at our model. But yes, unfortunately, there are some things that are membership-based. But I'm happy to speak to anyone who's interested, and I will send you all the links to the frameworks. We will request an email from people because they will send them to you digitally, but they are all freely available.
Okay, so that's good to hear.
It's really nice to hear, Stuart, you sort of mentioning those things. And while you're talking, I've been reflecting on what we're doing here at LCCA and in other institutions I've worked for. I think where it's worked really well is when there is a whole institution approach. And I do think the role of employability shouldn't just sit with the career service. It definitely needs to be within the program, and it has to be sustainable and scalable. I don't think, however, many universities have got the engagement piece right. So, for example, everyone might be on board, right? But then there's a whole kind of comms and marketing piece that's required to get colleagues involved. You need governance structures which promote employability. Organizations which have done this well have, almost have, at LCCA, we've got a employability advisory committee, for example, meets every 3 months, where we've got a range of employers coming on. We have students and staff sitting on that. And I think that is replicated across many institutions. But there needs to be a governance piece around this as well. And I don't really hear from institutions on where that sort of governance piece sits. It really differs depending on which university you're at. So maybe, it'd be nice to hear your thoughts. Where does governance sort of fit within employability and higher education institutions?
So for me, employability sits in teaching and learning. And I think that's what it has to come under. Academically, it has to come under teaching and learning, the PVC for teaching and learning. Or you do, which we're starting to see, and I'm just going to refer to Wales because my role's changed. I work with less universities, but I'm very familiar with what they're doing. 2 universities there have assistant provosts for employability. And I think once you give it that importance and you give it a leadership steer, then you know that it is something that people are looking at. And I think, you know, that for me, when a part of the work that Advanced H do is consultancy, and I will always remember speaking to one university and saying, you know, I can give you the best consultancy advice for free, and that is, you know, the employability and careers came under libraries and estates, and I was like, put them both under teaching and learning. Make the provost for teaching and learning responsible, and you will see that change. And I think that's where we have to start.
We're not at that.
Into teaching and learning. Yeah.
We're not at that stage just in England just yet, where you've got sort of provosts with employability titles. I'm not sure I've seen anywhere at that kind of level.
Learning, Stuart.
I'm going to have to revert to Google as my friend on that one. I think there certainly was, whether they still do. I don't know if I've got my.
But you agree that it would be a good. Do you agree that it will be a
Dean of Students, and then employability falls underneath that? But as a title, that I find that the reason I'm saying this, I've done a lot of work with sort of the Quality Award at AGCAS, and that's really interesting. And having sort of your profession of careers can actually go up to a provost level. You know, it's interesting that's happening in Wales. I'd love to see that in the UK. I mean, I could be, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there we go. There's an associate provost at UEA for employability and opportunities. So they are starting to come in. UEA, I'm familiar with some of their work and some of their colleagues there, and they've done some fabulous work around peer enhanced e-placements. Professor Lisa Taylor, and she's got a book out. She's a health practitioner, and she turned all of her placements online during COVID, and this peer enhanced in placements, PEEP, that's a model that's been done to good effect. And I think, you know, if you're looking at how can you scale that online kind of opportunities is there. But you're right, and for me, I think one of the reasons why Wales has moved on is it's in some ways it's a microclimate. There are 9 HE providers. It is a separate funding body. The funding body themselves, albeit government, but arm's length, have given funding to make this an absolute top priority. And I love working there because, and look, you know, I think it's fair to say that it's not all perfect. You know, we would love to have every single HE member of staff part of the community of practice there and engaging with that. But what you are doing is you're seeing a real buy-in and a real sense and people understanding the value of it. And I'm not going to say that because we did that work that those roles have come about, but I don't think it's purely coincidence that they decided to do those after having a national review of employability and seeing where they benchmarked against themselves in a nation, and then seeing the work carry forward. So, you know, and all of the work that comes out from that is freely available. The community's private, but all of their publications are freely available and published. And I'll make sure you get them, Nadine. It would be great to stay in touch hereafter and make sure you get links to those. So, yeah, but you're right. I think, you know, where do we stand? What is the value of education, and what does it need to be? And I think politics, government, you know, there's a lot to be done and said about that. And, you know, I think, you know, hopefully there'll be a new student support champion announced very soon. And what difference will that make? Having Professor Edward Peck now down at the OFS from, you know, a strong university background, what difference will that make to a regulatory body? And I don't know. And you know, it's a complex picture.
But it's nice to also hear about what the future might look like in this sphere. As we come to the end very soon, we'll have one last question that we can discuss. But just before that, a shout to the Chalk and Talk podcast with Anna Stocky. This is an Othergate educational podcast. She's a passionate advocate for evidence-based math education for students of all ages. And on her podcast, she talks about everything from effective teaching methods, how-to guides for teaching math facts, to tips for evaluating research claims. So search for it, Chalk and Talk with Anna Stocky. But back to our podcast, Teachers Talk Radio, Tuesday Twilight Show about employability today with two amazing guests. I couldn't imagine better guests today than Nadim and Stuart. Thank you very much. And the last question, we talked about a lot of things and how much it should be part of the curriculum. But at the same time, we didn't really talk about the role of the actual the Department of Careers and Employability that universities set up. And there's a huge, we mentioned earlier, the engagement. There's a huge challenge of engaging students outside of the scheduled sessions. And certainly there are amazing programs and sessions and guest lectures. And I know that you are doing a lot, Nadim, with your team and also in other institutions. But it's always becoming a challenge to get the engagement when it's a non-scheduled hour. So I just wanted to also touch upon this, asking both of you how to make sure that also students are excited, that also their teachers are on board to actually make sure that they attend these, knowing all the challenges they have with having their family, with having a job. So let's just finish with this as well.
I'll keep this really brief, and this is based upon 20 years of trying to answer this question. How do you get students engaged? And I think I've come to the conclusion that as much stuff within the curriculum as possible is the way forward. And if you're running events and we know students are time poor, a very practical thing that I've found is giving them between 6 to 8 weeks notice to attend one event. Gives them enough time to plan around their life. And universities put things on and then expect students to join 2 weeks after the announcement. So I think those things, giving students as much opportunity as possible and planning those events well in advance can mean they can take time off work and attend, etc.
Yeah, that's a good thing. But can I just ask them, when it's in the curriculum and in an ideal world, then you are part of, so when designing the curriculum, it's already there, right? Because otherwise then it can compete, and the lecturer might say that, how will I deliver this, content? And I also,
you embedded careers fair as a part of a management module, and students have to attend that fair as a part of their week, but that requires out of the box thinking. It requires lecturers and program leads to really, as a part of periodic program reviews, to look at their curriculum, because you don't really get much chance sometimes to change the curriculum. It needs to go through cycles, etc.
And as we said, it's a lot of collaboration between the departments. Stuart, do you have anything to add here? Do you think it's important to have something outside of the curriculum as well, and then how to make sure that?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think when we talk about it being fully embedded in the curriculum, that is the gold standard. And I think we're not there yet. And I think if anyone's doing anything, that is good. There needs to be some level of support. It's a perennial issue, and I don't know the answers, and I haven't been in an institution for a long time. But I think there's a couple of things to think about, and maybe technology can help us. Maybe as we go forward with AI, we can have career chatbots that can be accessed 24/7. And when students want to log on at 2, 3 in the morning, that career chatbot may well be able to help answer some of those questions. We've seen some brilliant work from Danny Mizher. So in terms of like CVs into ChatGPT and all the rest of it, and look, there's some data protection and things that people need to check and make sure they're comfortable with, but there's some brilliant work around AI that's being taken forward. Danny's at Coventry in London, I believe. The careers there. But I also think there's some other things that we can perhaps think about. One of the best things is our alumni network. And I'm not necessarily talking about alumni that have gone off and done amazing things. I'm talking about recent graduates. I used to struggle on one of my courses getting students to understand the importance of some of those early assessments. And so what we used to do is we used to bring in a recently graduated or the second year students talk to the first years. And we used to call the session, tell me what you know that you wish you knew when you were sitting here, or something like that. And it was brilliant. I could sit there and say, you need to do this, and they wouldn't listen to me. They would sit there and go, this is what I really wish I'd done. And it's just worth its weight in gold. Are we using stories and careers from people, that there's no point going into a diverse campus and bringing in a middle-aged white man in a suit to talk about creating an enterprise? Can the students see themselves in those guest lectures? Can they see themselves in the people that are there? Where do our students go? And I apologise for using Wales. It's only because I've recently written the report, so it's in my head. Over 60% of the workforce in Wales is SMEs, small and medium enterprise. 60% of the workforce. So actually, for next year, the work we've set ourselves in that group is to work with SMEs and see what that looks like, and how can we look at that, because there's a real opportunity there in terms of placements, but support and all the rest of it. So where is it the students are going? I think the other thing to always remember is sometimes reaching those students that need it the most, we can't always get to, or we don't know why. So we need to ask them, what do you want? What's available? We can come up with the best ideas in the world, but with the greatest respect, we're lucky now. We're privileged. We've moved on. We're digital poverty. You mentioned that earlier, and I was just sitting there and thinking, actually, how humane were we all during COVID? I remember going, those first early days. And people were like, oh, I'm so sorry, the internet's working. Oh, I'm so sorry, the cat's just walked in front of me. And people were really like sorry and understanding, and nobody mind if someone gate crashed you. Students were in houses of multiple occupancy, maybe with a mobile phone and no internet, just a signal. So where's the digital poverty, and how are we bridging some of those divides as well? So I think just being a little bit more humane and asking and finding out what it is that they want, that's got to be the starting point. That co-creation is worth its weight in gold.
Great thoughts. Yeah, and I really loved that you mentioned the inviting past students and alumni, and when we did that, it was so powerful. Exactly, as coming from exactly the same background. It's even if saying very actually the student just told the then current students what I was telling him, and he was not listening up until a while when he started to do it, and then how it changed. But it was much more powerful than hearing from me, and for many students it was a turning point. I agree that we should do it, and obviously also prepare the students on what they will talk about, but that's really powerful. I agree. Yeah, I don't know.
One thing you didn't mention, and I guess this is this is a whole other podcast. You can talk about this.
We can invite the both.
It's mentoring as well. There's countless examples of how mentoring students can make an impact on one's outcomes.
Yeah, and that is
another time.
Actually, I was part of it at the University of Westminster. They have a fantastic Future Ready program, and they made it a program in itself with a team where they invite SME owners and entrepreneurs to actually work with students in group mentoring for, I think it was 3 or 5 sessions. And that is amazing, really, to bring them in. And then I also worked with the worshipful company of the City of London, and this is very close to many of the institutions I worked with. And they are set up. They have a fellowship system where they help universities with their members, mentoring them. So it's a fantastic one that you thank you for mentioning it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Manchester Metropolitan University do their RISE program, and I was fortunate enough to be invited to be a mentor last year, and around employability, and made connection with a fantastic student. We're still in touch. We're connected on LinkedIn, and that support that goes in and providing those students with mentors and people they may never have met or been connected to before. And there's some really fantastic work out there. So yeah, you're right. Mentoring is really, really important.
Yeah, thank you. That's
two-way process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Reverse mentoring has huge benefits.
Reverse mentoring as well. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for mentioning it. And I think that it also comes back to the network, that students don't have that network, but having that mentor, the SME owner, or you can connect them with, we can then also connect them later on with a network they otherwise wouldn't have, especially coming
absolutely
once they would never meet the kind of network they would need to succeed. So yeah, thank you very much. Wow, amazing thoughts, a lot of practical examples. Thank you so much to my 2 wonderful guests, Nadim Chaudhry and Stuart Norton. Thank you very much for coming along. Thank you everybody who listened to us live. And obviously to all of you who listen to us from the recording. Thank you to our partners, Hashi Learning, Talk and Talk with Anna Stocky, and AQA. And once again, thank you to the 2 of you. It was, again, a pleasure, and thank you for dedicating your time. So bye, everybody. I'll see you in 2 weeks, and have a very nice rest of the evening.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.